a bit of background on me and on my kind of entrepreneurial journey, and then try and kind of home in specifically on my move to the US and try and take you through some of the learnings from that. I have co-founded 3 businesses, all with my brother Ben, starting in the early 90s. Our first business was actually buying and selling second-hand IBM equipment, which is a horrible business, which barely qualifies as technology, in fact. But it did give us an early view into the way the market was. This was in the early 90s. It gave us an early view in terms of the way the market was shifting away from the big IBM systems and more towards PC-based networking, wide area-based networking, this thing called the internet. And this company called Cisco, which back then was relatively small, we felt seemed to be at the forefront of this move towards networking and the internet. So we made what proved to be a very good decision to turn the company on its head, change the name to RBR Networks, and we became a specialist Cisco supplier in 1993. We were based up in Gloucestershire. We were just in a converted barn in the middle of nowhere, and we often joke that we kind of read the memo wrong, and instead of ending up in Silicon Valley, we ended up in the Stroud Valley. We partly by luck, and I think partly by really acting on our conviction, we got into the Cisco market really early, before Cisco even had a presence in the UK. And we became a supplier to the early buyers of Cisco, who were mainly telcos and big networking companies like Siemens, AT&T, people who back then were having to buy directly from Cisco in the States, but that was long 6 to 8 week lead times. So they really needed a local supplier, and we formed that kind of place in the market, and we were really in the right place at the right time. So we built RBR successfully. We were Cisco's own business was just kind of exploding, and we were just kind of clinging on to their coattails. Within 6 months, we were doing £1 million a month in Cisco equipment. We built it up to be the largest supplier of Cisco in Europe. Our revenues when we sold in 1998 were about $120 million. We had a good exit, so that taught us a lot. We made some money. But we felt that we were interested in the internet and having the thing about RBR, even though it had been successful, is it meant that we had to kind of every month you had to go back to the beginning, and you had to sell equipment. So you didn't have any kind of ongoing revenue stream. So we liked the idea of an ongoing revenue stream. So we also were supplying. Through RBR, we were supplying a lot of the early ISPs, and we felt that they were very focused on either this was sort of mid-90s, some of you might remember this, but back then they were very focused on either the kind of consumer side of the market or the large corporates. So we set up Star as an ISP to focus on the mid-market and try and provide internet access, but real hand-holding to help businesses get set up with the internet, because back then it was a pretty complicated thing to do. So Star became well established in the ISP market, and then we were trying to innovate within Star. We were trying to increasingly the ISP market became more and more about scale and having hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in your network, and it was difficult for Star to compete. So we thought that we should innovate and introduce additional services beyond just a kind of connection to the internet. One of the additional services that we built a prototype for was a in the cloud antivirus service. So this was late 90s. The first virus that had a piggyback on email was called the Melissa virus. Some of you might remember, in 1998. And viruses had been a bit of a side issue that kind of techies bothered about, but no one else really were too concerned about. But once viruses had piggyback on email, the whole problem changed. It became a much, much bigger problem. So we felt, a bit like a water company filters water and then you turn on your tap and it's clean, we felt, well, why don't we build a system into the internet? So you just redirect your email, we scrub it, quarantine the bad stuff and pass on the good stuff. And that proved to be so successful because suddenly these email viruses were breaking out, causing huge problems across the internet, that we then decided to found MessageLabs in 2000 to kind of scale up that technology and build a new company and really take advantage of what we felt was a real opportunity in the markets. we were really building the world's first, or one of the world's first software as a service companies. So we were building a system into the cloud, and in doing that, we were able to identify viruses in a more data-driven way. So traditional antivirus software is very reactive. Some of you might know it was designed in a pre-internet world. So you download your software, and then when there's a new threat, you have to download new updates, and the update looks for an exact match. It's called a fingerprint for that threat. So we felt that that was too reactive to really deal with the fast-moving email-borne viruses. So there needed to be a new solution. So we built the system into the cloud, but we also deployed a more data-driven approach. So we looked at the reputation of the sender who sent the email. We looked at the movement patterns within the email, because we realized when an email contained a virus, it followed a very distinct pattern. And we patented all this pattern recognition technology. And then we looked inside the email itself for any signs of a previous virus, because viruses are always derivative, they're never built from scratch. So in doing that, we were able to form a predictive score, a predictive decision about whether an email contained a virus or not. So we weren't dependent on updates, we weren't dependent on an exact match. We could actually dynamically identify new threats, and we were the first company in the world to be able to do that. And we were absolutely in the right place at the right time. So we founded the business in 2000. In May of 2000 was a love bug virus, some of you might remember, which just caused havoc around the world. We stopped it, we named that virus, and actually the Times newspaper wanted to feature us on the front of the newspaper as like this British team that stopped the love bug. And so they came up to our office and they said, oh, we want to take a picture of your team, and there was like 4 of us in the company, and we were on the front of the Times. So anyway, so that was a big breakthrough for MessageLabs, and we were just in the right place at the right time. Viruses were becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Traditional antivirus software couldn't cope, and we really had a true groundbreaking solution to the problem. So it was very exciting times. We then realized that we moved from virus into spam, and we realized we could deploy much of the same technology to spam as we had to viruses. So then we had 2 services rather than 1. And then I moved out to the US towards the end of 2002. We'd already had failed expansion in the US in 2001. So about a year after we founded MessageLabs, we had an American friend. I mean, the whole decision making was absolutely terrible thinking about it. But we had a sort of mate who was based in Minneapolis, which is in the middle of nowhere. And he persuaded us, we actually knew him from the RBR days, he persuaded us, so I can set up the MessageLabs US company. Minneapolis is very central, and I can set up MessageLabs Inc. And so we put some money behind him, didn't know him that well, didn't really know the US market very well. I mean, Minneapolis, thinking back on it now, Minneapolis, really not the right place to be. And it surprise, surprise, it completely and utterly failed. And so that was a real learning for us. But the UK, European business was starting to really grow pretty well. And I think we decided that we needed to make a more serious investment into the US. So I moved to the US towards the end of 2002. So I guess we were really, we were fully operational in the market at the beginning of 2003. And I literally thought that I would be there for a year or 2 and get things set up and come back. And I'm still living in New York now. We sold the company in 2008. But it's been an amazing experience for me, both on a business level and on a personal level, to move to the US, take a tech company from Europe into the US, get slapped around the face quite a lot because you're some funny tech company in the UK, but actually figure it out. I think it made the whole company stronger. I learned an awful lot. Moved to the US towards the end of 2002. So I guess we were really, we were fully operational in the market at the beginning of 2003. And I literally thought that I would be there for a year or 2 and get things set up and come back. And I'm still living in New York now. We sold the company in 2008. But it's been an amazing experience for me, both on a business level and on a personal level, to move to the US, take a tech company from Europe into the US, get slapped around the face quite a lot because you're some funny tech company in the UK, but actually figure it out. I think it made the whole company stronger. I learned an awful lot from the experience, and the US actually became our largest market over time. So we were actually able to expand in the US and really be successful over there, which was fantastic. So I'm going to talk about some of the lessons learned, because there were many lessons learned from the whole experience, and I think you learn more about from the screw-ups and the mistakes we made, and we made plenty, than you did from the successes. And I think as soon as you expand into another market, and there's no bigger market than the US, it's a daunting, very, very challenging thing to do. So I'm going to try and give you a bit of an insight into that. But just sort of finishing this story, we got to 2008, and by that time we had about $150 million of recurring revenue. Little old us out of Cirencester. I think that we were the second largest SaaS company in the world behind Salesforce at the time, and we were gearing up for a big IPO, which we were very excited about. And then obviously it's 2008, so the markets crashed. But we ended up selling to Symantec for about $700 million. So it was I think behind WebEx was the second largest SaaS exit at the time that there'd been. There's been many larger ones since. With the exit, I think it was actually much better for us to sell to Symantec in cash than to IPO. IPO is not really an exit. I'm not sure as a company we were ready to be a public company. So I think it probably worked out for the better. And then after about a year after selling MessageLabs, me and 3 other guys, really the part of the founding team behind MessageLabs, we set up Notion. And I think the idea behind Notion was, our belief that all software is moving to the cloud, and that is a huge kind of mega trend that's going to unfold over the next 10 years or so. And we're relatively unique in terms, certainly in European terms, in that we're a team that have built and scaled a big cloud-based software company. So how do we combine those two things together? So we set up Notion to be an investor with very kind of entrepreneurial roots, and an investor just focused on B2B cloud-based software, because we think our knowledge and our experience of that market gives us a kind of real distinct advantage to select companies and support companies once they're in the portfolio. So that's what we're doing, as many of you know, and we now have about 300 million under management, about 40, keeps changing, but about 40 companies in the portfolio, I think. So I think we're establishing ourselves as the leading investor within the B2B SaaS, B2B enterprise software space. And I think the European market is growing and growing, and so we feel good about the future. So this is the MessageLabs revenue growth. And being like a sort of perfectionist entrepreneur, I just see this line and just think, that's just terrible. But I think it, just as you get bigger, it becomes faster and faster to grow. And I think that, to be honest, over time, as we got towards like 2006, 2007, there was more and more competition in the market, and our technology was kind of first generation. Like our UX really wasn't that good. I think we learned a lot from that. And some of our smaller competitors, one of which was Mimecast, who's now a giant public company, which is interesting. They were like just an annoying little fly to us back in the day, but now look at them. So yeah, they've done fantastically well. But I think that you can see the revenue growth and the slowing overall growth, which I think is pretty typical. But this is the year that we sold, where we had about 9 million users. I think we had about 12,000 companies, something like that, and we sold for about 5 times the revenue. So it's an interesting graph to kind of track the companies in our portfolio against, and it's interesting to see. I think we moved to the US in 2002. I think the US started to really kick in probably in 2003 and became an ever increasing percentage of the overall revenue number. But we like looking at this data. We like looking at MessageLabs relative to some of the other big public SaaS companies that are out there now, like Workday or NetSuite, people like that. And we like to use it to track our own companies as well. But yeah, we're pretty proud of that, and I think it proves that you can build a big company out of Europe. Our big competitor was called Pastini, and they were founded at exactly the same time as MessageLabs, and they were founded in the Valley. And so we managed to build MessageLabs up to a company about twice their size. So we're pretty happy about that.
Joss, what was your net revenue on
In 2008, our EBIT was going to be about 15 million profit. So we were starting to, and it's kind of what you need to do as you IPO. They like you, or they certainly did. We were going to IPO in the UK, and the UK is much more profit focused, whereas I think the US is more about growth. I mean, maybe it's starting to change now, as long as you've got as long as you've got good margins and a path to profitability. But we actually started to be much more focused on our cost base leading up to the IPO. We felt it was important that we had double-digit EBIT performance for the IPO year, so we were going to do exactly that, about 50 million. And that was growing. The profit number was actually growing pretty well over time. So the following year, it would have been an even higher percentage.